morning, Sunnyvale. Man, it's great to be with you all. I'm excited that we're in week 2 of our Becoming series. Now, I want to start our time together with a little audience participation, okay? How many of you have ever been asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? By a show of hands. Raise your hands up high, okay? All right, some of you students, young adults, you're in the room and you're like, yeah, that question brings me a lot of anxiety because my parents want me to be something, but I want to be a YouTuber, okay? You know, and you're like, they don't understand. You can make millions of dollars just playing Fortnite, and I'm trying to show them, and they're like, yeah, but you need to be a doctor or something. And you're like, I'm afraid of blood, you know? But the reality is maybe some of you that are already in your careers, you're thinking about that question, still going, I don't know. I'm waiting to grow up, and so I'm trying to figure it out. But you know what's funny about that question is when you ask that, it's actually more connected not to what you want to be, but what do you want to do? What's the thing that you want to do? Here in the Bay Area, we place a very high value on what we do vocationally, the thing that we get paid to do. Careers, they are important, but if we are true and honest with ourselves, although they do make a big impact on the things that we do and who we become, they are a small piece of the God-given identity that is actually granted to all of us. And so that's why during this series, we are on a journey together, trying to unpack this very large, this very big, audacious question. Who am I becoming? Who am I becoming? And we're using kind of this framework that started last week with Pastor Felipe, that who I am matters more than what I do. Who I am matters more than what I do. And if you haven't watched it, please go back on YouTube and watch it. And today, we are going to spend most of our time and energy on why you do what you do matters more than what you actually do. And next week, I'll be back to unpack how you do what you do matters more than what you do. And lastly, we will close out the series that what you actually do still really does matter, but it is last on the totem pole of all of this. And we are basing this series Becoming off of an amazing book of our friend and church planner up in San Francisco, Ben Pilgrim, and his book called Bring It Out. As you guys have all heard, it is our free gift to those of you that are here for the very first time. Please come by the hub afterwards. And if you are walking through the series with us and this is something that you are really asking, this is a great additional resource to the messages that we're talking about and a great opportunity to invite your friends who are coming or asking this question in your spheres of influence. So make sure that they're here. Now, not everyone here knows my background. I have not always been a pastor in my adult life, okay? Prior to becoming a pastor, I was a businessman. I started out in the world of accounting and finance and then recognized I talk too much. I'm not an introvert. So I went into sales at a startup and then eventually became an entrepreneur, started my own business, ran a restaurant, did some consulting, and then found my way to be a pastor. Now, in 2012, I was working for a social media marketing startup company called Wildfire, and we were selling software to marketers to help them market to people on social platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And we were making pretty big headways in that space, so much so that summer we caught the eye of the biggest marketing company here in the Silicon Valley, Google. And they began to look at us and evaluate us. And then that summer, they acquired our company for $350 million. I did not make that much money. I made $4,000 over 4 years. But I went from a startup employee to a Googler overnight. And one of the realities that I didn't actually know, but I became more and more invested in the Google status and my identity being connected to being an employee there, more so than I was even as a husband, a father, or a follower of Jesus. And this became a little bit more relevant to me later on because all of my energy, all of my time went towards the things that I was doing for Google. I ended up having to, as a result of my job, travel 3 weeks out of the month from the West Coast to the East Coast. And my wife basically became a single mom. I was gone, and my son would see the planes and go, Dada. And so we realized that this thing that I love so much was actually building a wedge in between the things that truly mattered most to my soul. And so after some prayer and some decisions and some fasting, I had to make one of the hardest decisions of my life. And we decided, you know what? We're going to leave California. I'm going to quit my job at Google because I think the why I'm created to be a husband, to be a father, to be a follower of Jesus matters more than the thing that I do vocationally working for Google. Now, this wasn't like easy, okay? I am the kind of guy that will just jump and run. But I had to ask myself some big questions of like, am I just a failure who couldn't manage his household and his career at the same time? I had to ask the question of like, is this the biggest, dumbest decision of my life and I am totally sabotaging my future and my family's longevity? I even had to ask the question, will God still be as pleased with me as a normal person and not a Googler? Right? I mean, it sounds dumb when you say it out loud, but have you ever been there? Have you ever felt that way, wondering like, is this thing that I'm doing and I'm spending so much of my time and energy really that important? Like students, does it really matter learning calculus in high school? And is that going to benefit my life? Probably. Yeah, the moms are saying it, but like reality, like probably not. I mean, like, okay, like I know how to add and subtract, and my budget is okay, you know, like it's good. Like if you want to be an engineer or do something crazy, like maybe like it's gonna be important, but like the jury's still out. Like calculus, yes, no, like I haven't used it in business once, okay? Maybe for you, you're like, okay, is this new data compression engine that I am project managing really going to change the world, right? Okay? Here in the Silicon Valley, we're a little bit jaded on how often we cast vision for the revolutionary new products that are coming out. It's like Apple, every time they release the iPhone. Well, the camera is by far the greatest invention we've ever done. We've taken it from a straight line and we've turned it into a triangle now. Your pictures are going to be more crisp, beautiful. But really, they just leverage the software Google developed for Google Photos behind the scenes. I'm just saying, I'm still wrestling between my identities, okay? But the reason that we feel all of this is because what we're longing for is what we do to be connected to some sort of significance on this planet. We want significance in our careers, in our families, in our relationships. And that is why today we are focusing on why. Why we do what we do matters more than what we do. And so we've identified who we need to be clean vessels from the inside, but why is connected to the motivation behind our ambitions. That is why Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, was such a craze a decade ago. But today we're not going to focus on his TED Talk. We are actually going to lean into the Bible because we believe the Bible actually has a lot to say about matters of the heart like this. And so we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. A letter written by the Apostle Paul, a follower of Jesus, to the church in ancient Greece in a town called Corinth. And he had been writing this letter to his friends, people that he had spent time with as a result of some of the questions that had come up. Now, in chapter 12, he had talked to them all about the good things that they can do through the spiritual gifts that God has given to them. And we're going to focus on that chapter next week. But at the end of chapter 12, he says something. He says, but now, let me show you a way of life that is best of all. He's using that framework where, yes, how you do what you do and the things that you do really matter, but the why is so important that I want to make sure you don't miss it. No matter what you do, if you miss this portion, you will miss it all. And that's where we're going to pick up in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting in verse 1. If you have your Bibles, follow along. If not, it's going to be on our side screens over here. It says, if I could speak all the angels or all the languages of earth and of the angels, but didn't love others, I would be a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. You notice how all of those things are really good things. To speak the language of angels and of the earth, to understand God's plans, to have faith that moves mountains, to sell all I have, to give it to the poor. But if I don't love others, I would be nothing. I wonder if you would say that phrase, be nothing, with me on the count of three. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Be nothing. Okay, those of you in the family viewing room, out in the lobby, I want to hear you guys. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Be nothing. Okay, let's practice this together. I can have the most philanthropic career and ambitions, but without love, I would be nothing, okay? I can create social content that genuinely helps others, but without love, I would be nothing. That's right. And I can even start a church that leads people to the life-changing relationship through Jesus, but without love, I would be nothing. As we were preparing for this message, I was working on it with Pastor Tim, our online pastor, and he was telling me of this story about a play written by T.S. Eliot called A Murder in the Cathedral. And it's all based on this man, Thomas Becket, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury in the 1100s, and his mounting conflict with King Henry II. This religious and political tension that was bubbling to the surface, that there was death threats and a lot that was going on. But Thomas Becket, the main character here, one of the things throughout the play that is highlighted is his integrity, his desire to do the right thing no matter what happened, even if it cost him his life. And the guy who created the play put 4 different temptations in Thomas Becket's path. And they showed a variety of ways of how he could respond to the scenario that was in front of him. The first temptation was to, avoid all conflict, to seek safety and a peaceful life. It's like those people who moved to Nashville because they didn't like the policies of California. Like, you're dead to us now, but we still love you. Stay in California. It's a good place here, okay? Yes, it's expensive, but it's like 65 degrees in January, okay? The second temptation was to build political alliances that would actually serve him to then go against the king. So put the people around you to go combat and push the king down and elevate yourself, okay? The third temptation was to seek revenge against the king and all of his wrongdoings. Now, all of those scenarios were about Thomas and having the things that he wanted to preserve his own life, to avoid the tension or to make sure he's on top. And he, knowing who he is, said, no, that's not the right thing. That would compromise my integrity. But then the fourth temptation came around, which is really interesting. And this fourth temptation, it actually cost him his life, but it was the thing that came with that cost. It was rather than just doing the right thing and having it cost his life, it would result in him becoming a martyr and his name being remembered forever, and he would get all of this personal glory. So you're going to die for the cause, but you're going to die with your pride and your glory surpassing you. Now, T.S. Eliot, he said that the reality is this last temptation is the greatest treason. To do the right deed for the wrong reason. Another way that we could say this is that if you do the right thing for the wrong reason, it is the wrong choice. Let's do that one more time. Doing the right thing for the wrong reason is the wrong choice. It's like that math equation. No matter what you do, if you put a negative in there, it will always be negative. See, the why we do what we do needs to be pure. It needs to not be motivated by ourselves. And the why, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, the greatest aspiration is to be marked with love. Like if we were to evaluate God himself, there are so many different words that we could use to describe him, but the one word that best describes him is the word love. Jesus exemplifies this in John chapter 15. He said, "There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for a friend." Jesus, who we believe is God incarnate here on earth with us, who died for us, who came fully human, fully God, but said all of the sin, the things, the mistakes that we make, he took them upon himself and laid down his life so we could have connection to God the Father. He said love is the greatest commandment. It is the thing that we should be known for. So as we follow him, that should be the thing that is our mark. That should be our why. Now, I understand this is way easier said than done. Because the reality is Jesus isn't walking with us each and every day physically here, and it's easy for other people to hijack that part of us. Personally, I am a 7 on the Enneagram. I'm pretty fun. I have a lot of great times, but I have an 8 wing, so sometimes I can be a jerk or misunderstood, and then I'll smile at you and I try to bring it back around because I don't like conflict all that much, okay? It's supposed to be fun and avoid pain. And I was at a conference a couple years ago, and there was a guy, his name's Mike Foster, who wrote a book that goes like one layer deeper than the Enneagram about the primal questions, the thing that you're always trying to answer. And my primal question is, am I wanted? I want to be wanted. I want somebody to love me, to be needed. And one time we were having a prayer moment, and I was sharing this with one of our other staff members, and he was like, "That's crazy." I was like, "No, that's like, it's an insecurity for me. Like, I want to be wanted." And he's like, "But that's still crazy to me." He goes, "Of course you're wanted. Everybody loves you." And I go, "I know. I work really hard at it to make sure I'm wanted. It's exhausting. Like, I don't always want to like have to be worried about it, but the reality is I'm always wanted by God, and that should be enough." That reality is not always as easy to grasp, but that is where Ben Pilgrim has this quote that totally speaks to my soul. It says, "Knowing God sees you can free you from making sure everyone else does." Knowing that God cares about me is enough. So that should be connected to my why. I'm not here to please everybody else. I'm here to please God. I have a question that I think we can wrestle with today. As you've walked through life, all the things that you've experienced up to this point in your trajectory, are you becoming a more loving person? Like, are you becoming someone that is more loving in all situations? Like, how does this come out of you? How do you show your love? A few years ago, my wife, Carla, she went on a getaway weekend with her mom down in Monterey. So I had the kids with me for the weekend, and I'm like, I'm a good dad. I'm a loving father. I want to create memories and moments for my kids. And stop laughing, okay? All right? I am a good dad, okay? All right? No, I suck at it a lot, but I'm growing. I'm becoming a more loving person, okay? And so I wanted to show my kids love. And one of the ways that I show my kids love, or I show people love, is I get out in nature with them. It's so fun to go on hikes and do all these wonderful things. And so I decided to take my kids on this beautiful hike up to Lexington Reservoir. And you can see, there is this beautiful moment at the top of the mountain. Now, I can let you know that my kids thought that I was torturing them on this walk. I was subjecting them to a death march, and they let me know this was not their definition of something fun or loving. And the only reason I got this picture is because I threatened them. I said, "We will send one picture to your mom to show we are having a good time. And if you smile and you kiss me, I'll buy you ice cream afterwards, okay?" I got it. But sometimes what love means to one person doesn't mean to somebody else. So was I becoming a more loving person because I got what I wanted? Or would it have been more loving for me to sit down and watch Paw Patrol for 3 hours? I don't know. I'm still asking myself the question. But like realistically, like culturally, we say we love things all the time. Like, oh, I love this burrito. It's so good, you know? Like, I love those shoes. I love that show. But having love be our why, we need to have a proper definition of what love is. And that's what Paul is trying to do here, okay? You've heard these said 100 million times, but think about it in a different way. Starting in verse 4, love is patient and kind. Well, we all suck at that one, okay? Love is not jealous, guilty, or boastful, or proud. Like, okay, let's go home. You know, like okay, he continues, or rude, okay? Like check, okay? It is not irritable, I suck. It keeps no record of being wronged, guilty. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. No, I want to win. No, love never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful and endures through every circumstance. Wow. Am I becoming a more loving person? See, the way we use the word love is not consistent with the way the Bible uses the word love. See, the word love in the Greek there is agape. It is the highest form of love. It is the type of love that costs us something. It's the one that's shown by the actions we do, and it is also not always natural to us. It requires us to engage our will, to do something that's going to cost us. Throughout my times of being a pastor, I've had the privilege of marrying many people. I'm married to Carla, but performing the marriage, okay? My kids say that all the time. I'm like, I will marry you, Cora. And she's like, that's weird, Dad. I'm like, I'm going to marry you, like, officiate your wedding, okay? And so, but when it gets to the portion of the wedding where it's a vow, like you exchange vows, like, I want to make sure that the vow is actually a vow. Not like, oh, I love you because you take out the trash and it's so lovely, or like, I promise that I will rub your back if you rub my feet. Like, okay, like, do that in the bedroom. I don't want to know about it. You know, like, it's so like, but a true vow is like, I will love you for richer or for, yeah, so when bills are tight, suck it up. You said it. I love you in sickness and in health. Man, that's a lot harder to do. Not like, you make me laugh, so that's why I'm here. You know? Those are not vows. They are like statements of flattery. A vow is, I love you even if it costs me this. So can I ask you again, are you becoming a more loving person? Are you growing in patience and kindness when your kids talk back to you? Have you been boastful or proud lately about the thing your company's doing, but you are actually not on that project? Oops. Oh. Guilty. Have you kept any records of wrongs of the things that people have done to you? Right? It's like, oh man, I can't wait till you offend me next time because I'm going to bring up the laundry list of things and let you know how crappy of a friend you are. Oh, you're mad that I was 5 minutes late to dinner. Let me tell you how many times you bailed on me, right? Right? It's so easy. But is that loving? Like, is yelling at your spouse really going to make you a more loving person, or is it going to affect your relationship? See, agape is not necessarily something that comes easy. And that's why I believe there's 3 points we can all learn and grow in to become more loving people in the area of agape love. And it's important to know agape is a choice that I make. Okay? It is a choice that I make. You notice how every word in that scripture, patience is a choice. Kindness is a choice. Boasting is a choice. So it requires my will to be engaged, and it is not what I naturally want to do. Okay, not only is agape a choice, but it is a fruit that I cultivate, which means I need to be an active participant. I have 4 garden beds in my backyard, and guess how much grows in there if I don't cultivate it? Nothing. I have to do the hard work of tilling the soil, make sure it's got manure in there, put the seeds in, water the seeds, get enough sunlight, pull the weeds out. And then it still takes time. It's not an overnight success. But you can cultivate fruit and you can cultivate love if you spend more time working on it, which means you need to be closely connected to the one who is love, which means in order to cultivate this love, you need to spend more time with Jesus. You need to be in his presence. You need to build rhythms that allow you to understand who he is so you can become more like him. So it is a choice that I make, it is a fruit that I cultivate, and it is a bridge that I build. Love is meant to connect people. It is supposed to bring reconciliation. Bridges keep no records of wrongs. Instead, they love regardless. They lay down their pride for the benefit of others. They rejoice with truth and they never give up, always working to bring people back together. See, love in the agape form is beautiful. But one of the realities that in order to do this, to become a more loving person, you can't do it on your own. Because if a love is meant to be a bridge that you build to bring people together, you need to experience it in community. Love can't be cultivated outside of relationships. It's when we're in circles, in relationships regularly that allows us to go, hey, that's probably not the greatest thing to say, or you're judging over there, but I just want to let you know your poop stinks too, okay? Because if all you ever do is be like, I'm not hanging out with those people because I see it, eventually you start to stink and nobody wants to be around you. And that is why we put such an emphasis on getting into community. To join a group. To not allow this year to go without being in community with people, because there are some alarming statistics. Did you know that 20% of Americans don't have a close social relationship? 1 in 5 of us don't have somebody we can be real with. And for men, it's worse. 28% of men under 30 have no close relationships. None. That is so important. That is why we create environments like Activate, to make sure people here in our community can find a place to connect. It's happening today. If you don't have a place to connect here, please join us for lunch. Now, one of the things that is really important to understand why love should be our why it should be our mark, because love will surpass all things. The result of love can be eternal. In verses 8 through 10, Paul talks about the dynamic of that. All of these wonderful things we can do are great, but love itself will last longer than all of these things. These other things that you do will actually become useless. They will fade away. That's why after chapter 12 of him talking about all these great things, he says, but don't miss the point. If you miss the point that love is the mark, you are going to fade away. See, whenever you go to like a funeral or a celebration of life, you have the opportunity to hear the stories about these people. And most of the time, it's based on the love and the relationships that they had. It doesn't matter if you had great wealth at the expense of neglecting your family. Nobody's going to come celebrate you. It doesn't matter if you wrote the best book or taught the best message, but you violated your integrity. Everyone will walk away. And the reality is, especially here in the Silicon Valley, we spend so much of our time, so much of our energy focused on things that are temporary. But love remains forever. See, this series, we're trying to be reminded that what we do matters, but it comes in the order of who we are, why we do it, and how we do it. It's all about perspective. And the reality is we don't always have the best perspective. That's why Paul in verse 11, he says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now, right now, we all see things imperfectly, like a puzzling reflection in a mirror. But there will be a day when we see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know is now partial and incomplete. But then, at that time in the future, I will know everything completely, just as God knows me completely now. My kids are super entrepreneurial. They're coming up with business ideas all of the time. And they are highly confident in the things that they are planning. Like they're 100% certain that this business idea will create the fleet of Lamborghinis for them and unlimited trips to Hawaii. And when they tell me their ideas as their father, who has a little bit more worldly knowledge, I try to bring some perspective, to share the reality, to poke some holes, to ask some questions. And whenever I try to shed some light, they just look at me and they go, Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. Just trust me, bro, okay? They're confident. But just like my kids don't have full perspective, we have a limited view and understanding of why God orchestrated the things to happen down here the way they are. Which is why we need to be reminded that having love be the thing we put our emphasis on more than what we do is because that's what He wants us to feel from Him. See, the reality is He looks at us and He sees us fully. He knows us completely. So He knows that despite your selfish nature, He still is madly in love with you. He knows even though that you have turned your back on Him and you've said things against Him in your anger and frustration, He still loves you. Even though your life feels like it's a mess and everything is in shambles, He still loves you. That's why the Apostle Paul, when he wrote his letter to the church in Rome, said, while we were still sinners, still screwed up, broken, people with our priorities in the wrong area, Christ died for us. See, that is the love that God represents. It's the love that He desires us to live by. And that's why in verse 13, Paul says, there are 3 things that will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these things is love. So let me ask you one more time. Are you becoming a more loving person when your kid has a meltdown for the 10th time today? Are you becoming a more loving person when somebody takes advantage of your generosity? When your boss adds another project onto your already overloaded plate? Or when someone online says things about you that aren't true, or your spouse is neglecting you? Are you becoming a more loving person? Now, love doesn't mean to enable or to turn a blind eye. Sometimes love is to set boundaries, to say no. But in all cases, love is a choice that we make. It is a fruit that we cultivate, and it is a bridge that we build, not for us, but for the benefit of others. Love, it's our why. And that's why Jesus said to His followers in John chapter 13, He said, so now I am giving you a new commandment. Love each other. just as I have patiently, without boasting, without keeping records of your wrongs, have loved you. You should show that kind of love to each other. Because the love that you have for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. This is the call for the church. Could you imagine for a moment with me if all of us in this room, those watching online in the family viewing room, out in the lobby, would embody the reality of this message? If we cared more about what Jesus thought of us than defending our biblical stances to outside of people. If we chose to love each other so deeply that the rest of the world would look for that kind of love. If the significance we deeply sought would be measured by the depth of our love rather than the things that we do. That is the kind of significance that God has for us. It's the kind of difference that will not just last today or tomorrow, but for all eternity. But we only get to see it if we truly answer the question and become a more loving person. Would you pray with me? King Jesus, we thank you for that kind of love that you gave to us. The reality that the more and more we spend time with you, that we choose to love people, that we cultivate that kind of love, and we build bridges to the people in our lives, that is when we see your kingdom come here on earth just as it is in heaven. So would you engage our will? Would you place us in relationships that challenge us but allow us to experience that kind of fruit? We know that we fall way short of your expectations. Help us be more like you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.